Hey everybody, this is Psalm 40. We are taking a break from our history lesson for a special guest appearance from Basil Rosewater, the co-host of Canary Cry Radio and Canary Cry News Talk, Emu Wrangler Extraordinaire, Metaverse Surfer, Time Traveling, Portal Gun Wielding, Burning Man Enthusiast. Here he is, Basil Rosewater. It's going to be an exclusive tip, because if anyone knows any canary lore, they're familiar with this, but I don't know that it's ever been explained. So, if you don't mind, could you unpack your Rastafarian phase for us?
Yes. Yeah. You want me to do that now?
Could you?
I can do that. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. So I reference it sometimes. It's just kind of a fun thing to reference. It's been a few years. There's been a couple times that I've talked about it here and there. I first talked about it back on my show, The Joyspiracy Theory, one of the early episodes there. But yeah, it's fun. I'm amazed by the way that God has kept me. I'm amazed by the way, I seem like a perfect candidate for like a prodigal son kind of setup, right? Born to a Christian family, was a child of pastors for a really long time, and it's well known in Christian culture that usually the pastors' kids are the ones that go way far afield, right? They're usually the bad kids who really get sidetracked. And then, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, they also have an awesome testimony of coming back to God, later in their 30s or 40s after they get off the drugs or whatever. And it has always tickled me, entertained me, and also amazed me. I think it's a miracle that I never really got too off track in that sense. Now, that being said, I do have to remind everybody, it's not like I was perfect, okay? I certainly had my own experimental seasons when I was younger, and I was always I was just always really loved God, and was always really, I had really early experiences. It was never a question. It was never, oh, is this whole thing a lie? Have I been lied to? God bless me with some early experiences of just miraculous experiences. So I was pretty convinced from an early stage. Now, that being said, you know, you get into high school, you get it's your opportunity to kind of experience different things. You kind of wander to and fro. But in my wandering, God always kind of kept himself at the center of my understanding. So I never really had a dalliance with agnosticism or atheism. I never really got into some sort of really rebellious stage. However, when I was around 16, marijuana and other experimental opportunities presented themselves to me. Well, I didn't really jump into, I didn't really fall into it. I wasn't really tricked into it, but it did start my sort of theological research into Rastafarianism. There's a phase when I was really into reggae music, and mostly because my friends were and the other people around me, I had a lot of, weed slash Rastafarian, white boy Rastafarian influence in my culture at the time. And so I kind of dived in. And it's a very interesting religion. And there's a lot of really good things about it. And there's also a lot of pretty solid Orthodox Christian theology involved. Now, that being said, there are some pretty specific theological differences, like heaven is in Ethiopia and only black people can go there. And Prince Selassie, I think it was the former ruler of Ethiopia, you know, comes back as like the kind of reincarnation of Jesus and takes all the black people back to Ethiopia. And that's, kind of the end time scenario. But I was able to look past these specific details. Hey, we all have the ability to kind of be blinded by or choose to be blind to specific theology. And it turns out in Rastafarianism, much like, the Christian sacraments of communion and the bread and the wine are a regular occurrence, or should be, or a lot of people choose to make them a pretty regular occurrence. In Rastafarianism, marijuana is a holy sacrament. And even the act of smoking marijuana and being high is specifically done with a kind of reverence, right? In America, and especially in like mainstream American culture, like, oh yeah, Rastafarians, they just get high and bang on bongo drums and like dance around in the park or something like that, wacky stoner types. But in the theology, which I really got now, again, I was 16 years old. The internet was not what it is today. Most things I learned about Rastafarianism was what was present on the Wikipedia page at the time. But that was kind of the depth of research that a 16-year-old could do at the time. So I did my research. I said, it's pretty solid. For the most part, they're pretty solid on their theology of Jesus. They love Jesus. The way they act and position themselves to God through Christ alone, is all very, it's not a hard translation to go from like American evangelical conception of Jesus and our relationship to God over to Rastafarianism. The benefit is, as a Rastafarian, you get to smoke weed and you get to do it as sort of a form of worship, right? Now, of course, we can have the pharmakia conversation and the opening of portals and doors conversation, and that's all true. I'm not here. Nobody mistake me here. I am not here to tell you that Rastafarianism is a valid option. Nobody here should go experiment with being Rastafarianism because of this story. But at the time, in my 16-year-old Wikipedia understanding of Rastafarianism, the relationship with Jesus part, which even then, I considered the most important part of Christianity. A lot of the theological, twists and turns, you can kind of take or leave. A lot of it is not necessarily a strictly salvation issue. And from my research, it looked like the strictly salvation issues in Rastafarianism lined up good enough for me. Okay, good enough for my 16-year-old Wikipedia brain. And so there was a period there. Honestly, it's been a long time. I couldn't tell you exactly how long it was. May have been 3 months, could have been 6 months, maybe a year, although I doubt it went that long. I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to be a Rastafarian, okay? I can smoke weed, but I won't be doing it like my friends. I'll be doing it as a sacrament to Christ, and I can, and I can talk about that with my stoner friends. And so through this pseudo, funny teenage conversion to Rastafarianism, I was able to like smoke weed with my friends. And then I would just like talk about Jesus to them all the time. And it was really weird for everybody involved at first. But then I kind of just got the reputation for like being the guy, if you go smoke with Basil, he'll just like talk about Jesus the whole time. And, my friends were mostly agnostic or atheist or post-Christian or something like that. And so it really opened up the door, and I got the opportunity to, do my best to present Christ, present the love of Christ, present the, these sorts of things to these teenage stoners for a period of time. And look, I'm not recommending it, but God works through all things, okay? The things that are foolish, he can use for his glory. Mm-hmm. And I like to think he did. I didn't like have any big conversion events with my friends. They didn't necessarily all bow down to Christ right then and there, but I considered it, suddenly I was able to talk to them about Jesus, where before this, I was really afraid, and not for nothing. A lot of them were really antagonistic to Christ, right? In that way that you are when you're a teenager atheist or agnostic and you just watch Zeitgeist and you're on the internet and people are telling you that Jesus is Mithra and Jesus is just, a story to control the masses, all this kind of basic middle school, high school, atheist theology. I suddenly had the opportunity where I wasn't afraid to talk to them about Jesus all the time. Now, I was stoned, and so were they. So, that can have something to do with it. But I really don't despise, again, it's an amazing, miraculous thing that God kept me my whole life in the ways that he did. I'm honestly astounded by that. And even through this pretty humorous period of my life in high school, where I Wikipedia researched my way into being a Rastafarian and talked to my friends about Jesus for 6 months to a year or whatever, I find it pretty humorous, and I praise God that he kept me through the whole thing.
Yeah, like you started with, it does make for a great testimony, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the Jehovah Witnesses almost got me when I was always like open to pretty much everything. I was strictly agnostic though, but like I would be open to anything, but I just hadn't made a decision. When I was getting to that period in my life where I was about to make some kind of decision like that, the way that Jehovah Witnesses advertise themselves to me, like I was in jail at the time. So
Mhm.
all of the different religions were coming around with their sales pitches. The Muslims, there was like a Baptist and then like a Presbyterian and a Catholic, and then the Jehovah Witnesses were there. And the Jehovah Witnesses were the only ones that seemed like legitimately community grassroots.
Mm.
Everybody else just had that institutional smell on them.
Right.
So that is really what sold me on that. And I'm like, you know what? You are the only people I ever see out in the streets talking about Jesus. So they almost got me.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Um,
That's so interesting.
and then another thing, you were talking about how like these small like exceptions that we make, how like they'll transition our life. I'm currently doing this like schizo history research project on my
Mhm.
hometown, and it's literally that exact story. Cause like it started out as a legit breakaway civilization getting away from the crown, and then it just steamrolled into, making exceptions on things. Like
Mm.
the revolution came and they're like, okay, well, I guess we're patriots now also. And then the Civil War came and it's like, okay, well, I guess we also have to go against slavery. So they slowly, over hundreds of years, you can see the worldview changing like through this story. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's cool. It's cool that it's like your local history as well. It's you're
Right.
very close to it. It's very, stuff like that also um, has a lot of context in the discussion about like principalities and powers and like geographical principalities over different regions. It's very connected to sort of unseen realm, divine council sort of things, because pretty much wherever you are in the world, and I've lived in a couple places that had, lore, whether it's like Native American lore in the area or whatever. And the Christian tradition that I grew up in very much would recognize that, hey, there are principalities and powers over this city, over this region. And, we pray that in the sort of grand spiritual battles that, God's angels or the this or the that, have victory in the unseen spiritual war, and that, ultimately God has sovereignty over everything. But the Bible talks about these various geographically based little g gods, right? You see it in the Old Testament. You see it in I think it's Acts. I know people kind of get the wrong idea when I use this word, but this sort of pantheon of principalities and powers that do have very specific geographical ties, and you can see that playing out in the histories of these places. And depending on your temperament or your the way that you, I guess, visualize or understand the unseen realm, understanding your immediate region and the history of the place can give you a lot of insight into what the sort of spiritual strongholds, the various sort of spiritual dominions, where the sort of seats of power are, this and that. There's a gamut of exactly how trippy and specific you can get. But that's a very cool project, man. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. It was actually a super low key, but also like super prosperous area pretty much from the beginning until like the 1950s, maybe.
Mm.
And then somewhere around there, I was trying to record a conversation with my mom about it last night, actually, because um, she grew up in like the whole county here. There's like maybe 5 or 6 towns in this county, but like pretty much everybody knows everybody in the county.
Mhm.
So that's the county has pretty much been my focus area, and within this county, it it was around like the 50s. Some real estate guy came in. She gave me his name too, so like she knows specifically who it was. Some real estate guy came in and he was buying up like the old like historic. Well, everything was historic at that point. There was nothing out here but woods, marsh, and like 200-year-old houses that were still in great condition. But just there was no development, but there was no need for it either. Nothing was dilapidated. It's just the way they were stuck in their own time bubble, I guess.
Mm. Yeah.
And so he started buying it up and doing uh like assistance programs, like low income assistance programs. So he was getting like tax write offs and like state funding and stuff like that. And then once that started, the town is very, very bad. It's a super high crime rate, like ridiculous. It's crazy there. It's very crazy. And it's crazy to see too, because it's still, well, around the pandemic, the town went through another evolution after the pandemic. All the old stuff is pretty much gone now. But it was like there were still old buildings, brick buildings, or like brick, state buildings, or like the wooden houses, like tall Victorian style stuff. It's like red brick sidewalks and stuff. And around 2019, some of that stuff either was getting torn down or finally started falling down. I don't know, but it was weird growing up there and seeing like, you know, masked gangsters shooting at each other in like what looked like, 17th century England. It's
Oh,
just a
great.
crazy sight. It's
Yeah,
a crazy
that's
sight.
interesting. Wow. Well, dude, I'm very excited for your podcast to come out. I know it's probably not time to pitch it to everybody, but when the time comes, I think, uh, Adam Curry, our buddy over at No Agenda, he started encouraging people, to do podcasts or whatever they, want to do. And but specifically in his analysis of like where he sees everything going, Hyper local podcasts are a really special, interesting niche. And not to say that your podcast is going to be so hyper local that it's not going to be interesting to other people, but hyper local podcasting has this really special place and this really special future. Again, not just for people in your area, although of particular interest and, a special place in the hearts of people just in your area. But again, for anybody, what a specificity is such a valuable resource when it comes to authenticity and, specificity has this way of broadening out into sort of a universal applicability. And so once your project's off the ground and out there, buddy, we'll definitely be pitching it. And it's not going to put pressure on you, but I think what you're doing is a really cool idea, and I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I'm actually just kind of jumping into it blindly. The only reason I'm starting with this is just because this is the only thing that's in my face right now. It's just something I've been doing, so that's what I decided to run with. Right, but the way that I looked at the whole like overarching podcast thing was basically an extension of social media or even a replacement of social media because I'm not on Facebook. I creep on Twitter sometimes only because I think that it's a very good source of news. But I don't do the social media thing. I don't share pictures of my dinner. I don't share cool history articles. So instead, why don't I just talk about it? And instead of having a timeline, I have this archive of my saved media instead of having it on a timeline. That's the way I'm looking at it. And throwing a locality on top of it, that does sound super awesome. I do like that.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think you're totally right too. The world is trying to figure out what sort of online socializing looks like, and it's clear that the big mega social platforms is not healthy, nor is it profitable to anybody who's on there. So yes, seeing podcasts and podcast communities as sort of almost a replacement method for making those social connections online in a much more, I think, sort of authentic and based way versus the kind of chaos that it is on these big social media platforms. I think you're right. I'm that sort of plan or that sort of idea. I can't wait to see how it sort of develops here in the future. So, well, God bless you, buddy. It's great to talk to you again. Can't wait to hear what comes out of your podcast project.
I appreciate the encouragement. I appreciate everything you've done, man. I've only been in your life maybe a couple of years, but you've been in my life over a decade. So I appreciate you.
God bless you.
Yeah. Thanks for stopping by my show.
There we go. There you go. It's wonderful being here. Look at me finally getting out on other shows. All right. God bless.
Yep. See you next time.
Take it easy.